Kia ora e hoa ma. Good morning, and I'm just popping on to talk about connections and what this week's work will look like. The first thing that you guys will be doing this week is a quick activity. It should only take you about a half hour, 40 minutes, and it will be a very useful task for you to be doing to prep you for the connections assessment. So we talked about doing war and music. So this is the and music part. So hopefully it should be quite enjoyable. You'll see that under written text exam that I have posted your first task. This is due tomorrow because I'd really like us to get started on our internal and get our teeth sunk into it this week. And so you've got here anti-war and protest music. This should be the first thing that you work on this week. So you're going to be able to select your own song to analyse, and I've given you a few to choose from. So the key thing about protest music to really understand is that with each war, the way that we protest has sort of changed. So in response to World War I, we had this huge surge in anti-war poetry, and that was the way that lyrically they responded and they would protest. Once we got into World War II, you had again poetry being the main response, and then moving into the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the war on terror in Iraq and Iran, that is when you started having this massive surge of protest music. And it was at this time that we really had a huge portion of America in particular really against the war, and it divided the country, and so did the music. And we saw this trend continue in response to the war on terror, the war in Iraq, in response to 9/11. And the purposes of music always remain to protest, to tell stories, and to heal. And so that's perhaps why music was a way that people dealt with the horrors of warfare or the stress and trauma that they were trying to avoid. So you've got 6 choices for songs. They are from a range of different genres. So you've got Light Up Your Lighter, you've got Metallica, and that's by Michael Franti and Spearhead, Light Up Your Lighter. 1, Hero of War by Rise Against, I Was Only 19 by Redgum. You also have MIA, so Missing in Action by Avenged Sevenfold, and Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones. So I've tried to do a little bit of a range. Some of these are from the Vietnam War, some of these are in response to the war on terror, and I believe Redgum, this one is in response to World War. It might be the Vietnam War actually, or World War II. I can't quite remember. I feel like it's the Vietnam War, but it's an Australian text. You'll find that the videos are for the song are hyperlinked into the image. The lyrics are into the title of the text, and you'll see that for each of these. So that's where you can find that information. Your analysis is just going to be comparing 2 songs. You can make your own document for this. You could add in slides to write your answers. It's really up to you where you record your information. I would like to have obviously access to it, so you might do it on a doc and attach it to this assignment. I've given you an example of a compare-contrast chart, so you might just make a copy of this, and I believe I might have already done this for you so that you can do your compare-contrast using your 2 songs. Put your picture in there, put your text in there. You can just do a little copy-paste from the slides, and then you're just going to compare them. So anything similar, put in the middle column. If it's specific to that text, put it there. If it's specific to that text, you can put it there. To go through this, start by brainstorming the themes in the song. Consider the themes we've seen in war poetry, such as physical losses, mental losses, realities of war, the pity of war, only the dead see the end of the war is hell. Do any of these apply to either of your songs? Write down any lyrics that appear to you to be important to the song and to the theme. So you might be doing this just on a piece of paper before you do your compare and contrast. Can you make any connection between the two songs? Setting, character, themes, symbols, sound devices, or imagery. Can you make any connections between songs in either Owen's poems that we've studied, so disabled or mental cases? So this is where we're starting to practice that connecting, that comparing and contrast. So you can connect text by how they're similar and maybe how they're opposites. Perhaps they are in contrast to one another. And that's going to be a key skill for your connections assessment. So moving on to the assessment, if we scroll up, you'll see that all of the work is in there for this assessment. This is 3 weeks worth of work. Okay, so we start off with the intro to the standard. So if we have a look in the information, it breaks it down into what the standard requires of you. So you can see that it is 2.7, analyze significant connections across text supported by evidence. So that means with quotes from the text or with film techniques from the text. It is worth 4 credits. So you're going to have 3 sort of sections to this standard. The first one is choosing a connecting aspect. So what that means is an aspect of text could be your theme, it could be your setting, it could be your character, it could be an event. So you could just have your connecting aspect being war poetry, or war, or World War One. It might be the battlefield. It might be set in an institution. However, because it's at level 1, that would have been fine. You could have had the connection of war. However, at level 2, you need to have 2 parts to your connection. So, for example, war poetry. So it's going to have the setting of war and it's all going to be poems. Or you could do something like poetry of Wilfred Owen. Or you could look at war is hell. Or you could look at war and trauma. Or you could look at Wilfred Owen and loss. So you've got these 2 parts to your connection, but it should be nice and simple. The easiest way to connect texts is through theme. So you might do only the dead see the end of the war. That's a little bit longer, but you could look at that. You could look at nightmares and trauma and look at poems to do with nightmares. Or you could look at something like the disabled narrator. So you could be looking at your characters or disabled characters or mental illness in war. Or mentally ill characters in war. And that way you could look at something in film. So you might do war in film, or you could look at PTSD in film, if you'd like. However, I would recommend doing the text that we've already studied because it's great exam prep, and it means that you're not having to go and do a bunch of extra work that you've already done the thinking for. So that's the first thing, is to identify your connecting aspects, and your texts. So you'll notice here, it does say connections come from both comparing and contrasting text, looking at similarities and differences. So when you're picking your texts, your 4 texts, you may pick 2 that are the same and 2 that are quite different, or you might have something that isn't quite the exact same but links to your overarching theme. So all of your texts don't need to link to each other or be the same as each other. They can be slightly different. In fact, that lends itself to a more sophisticated discussion about how texts connect. So I would be aiming, if you are looking at war and trauma, perhaps you find 4 texts from different wars, and so that they give you breadth as well as depth. So when you're picking your 4 texts, you do need to get them signed off by me, because you don't want to have a text that say, it shouldn't be relevant for this, but if you were doing something that was Disney based, it's really difficult to get level 2, NCA level 2 sophistication when you're talking about a Disney film or a Pixar film, for example. So I do need to sign off your texts. The other thing is you cannot choose, this is for an assessment, you cannot do a film that is R18. Or if you're 15, you can't do a film that is R16. That is illegal, and so you could get away with it, obviously, in your own time, or perhaps even the exam, but you cannot be doing it for this assessment. So just be wary if you're going to do any films that they need to be, you need to be legally allowed to watch them. It's also important to note that you could do 3 texts that we study in class. So you could do disabled, mental cases, one of those songs from the task I just showed you, but then you would need to pick one yourself. And that needs to be picked all by yourself. However, I've given you a text booklet that you do have at school on paper, and that is here. And so this has a range of text that you could go and choose from. The other poem you could choose is the one that you chose when you did your poet profile, and you picked your favourite text from that war poet. And you'll see here that you've got Dolce et Decorum Est, you've got Disabled, Mental Cases, Exposure. So you could just do War Poetry from Wilfred Owen and pick 4 poems from Wilfred Owen, and there are a few more here. You've got The Gunner's Lament, I Was Only 19, A Veteran Comes Home, Midnight Movie, War Photographer, and we're going to come back to this later. But that's a range of text that you could choose from, as well as any of the songs from this activity here. So you've got plenty to choose from. Once you've done that, you need to get your connection and your text signed off by me, and you'll see that you'll do that here, and that the due date is the 2nd of September. So you've got a few days to get that sorted, and I've given you some exemplars of what your essay might kind of look like, or a plan might look like. So men killed and men died because they were embarrassed not to. So I picked Dolce et Decorum Est, Who's for the Game, The Things They Carried, and Hacksaw Ridge. So you can see not all of them have to be, so this is a poem, this is a poem, this is a short story, and this is a film. So they don't all have to be the same text type. At this point, you're just kind of doing the bubbles. You might, once you've done all your analysis of each of them, then start making a plan for your intertextual connections. And I've done another one here. You could do a character like the hated other, or the wounded soldier, for example, so wounded and soldier. And I've got disabled, District 9, on the train, and bitter fruit. Poem, film, short story, poem. Again, different text types. And these numbers are, once I've done all my analysis, I've thought, okay, this would be a good logical flow with the connections. So that is part 1. Part 2 is when you start to do the bulk of the work before writing your essay. So part 2 is your connections logs. You will have one for each text, and you're filling this in nice detail. I can give plenty of feedback on these. I can't give plenty of feedback on the essay at the end. I did look into whether I could get you to avoid doing the essay, but unfortunately it's quite unavoidable, and it's good practice for the exam. Or you could use it for writing portfolio as well. So you'll do 4 of those connection logs before writing an essay with an intro, 4 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. 1 body paragraph per text. And you can see that here. It brings you to that. If you have any questions, please attend the Google Meets, and I look forward to seeing some of those connections come through. Good luck.